using Gemini to create summaries.
Started.
And those are our primary summaries of the calls that we're posting because they're pretty good. So we do a few things John does some work to check them to make sure there's nothing crazy in them, but that's our mode now. So then you can see a fair amount of detail of the discussion of the meeting, and then there's always a reference to the recording if someone wants to find that out.
Yeah, and actually everything you said is recorded, so you cannot speak bad about Gemini because otherwise we won't be happy about you. Well, by the way, just on that topic, there was a funny thing here on a Gemini recording in a recent meeting where somebody was talking about Deja Code, which is one of the About Code open source tool, and they call that danger code. Which is awesome. All right, let's roll. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. As a reminder for everyone, this call is subject to a code of conduct. You can find the code of conduct in the Git repo where we track the spec work. I'm going to put that as a link for reference. And just want to be nice to everyone and behave. First thing first, we'll approve the previous meeting. So you have in the chat, there's a Google document that we use to take running notes, which are there, then committed to the Git repo as a text file. The first order of business is to review the minutes of the last call. I'm going to paste the link also there in the chat. And I'm going to ask if there's anyone that has any objections. If you have objection, it's always possible to correct these with a pull request afterwards anyway. And as Michael was saying a bit earlier, these notes are in part summarized and created by speech-to-text transcription from Google Gemini and carefully reviewed by human intelligence. Okay, if there's no objection, we'll consider the minutes approved. Next up is to take the agenda. So if you can have, first make sure your name and affiliation is listed in the attendees list. Welcome, Jason. We've never seen you before, so maybe you want to do a quick word about you a bit later. Beyond this, we would like to take agenda items for the day, so I'm going to do a quick roll call. John, is there something you want to bring up?
Nothing from me, Philippe. Thank you.
Michael?
Yes, I want to bring up the refined schema PR, and how do we get it done? The one that you submitted, 5/14, I think it is.
Okay. Okay. Yanis?
Nothing from my side.
Okay. Matt?
Nothing today.
Okay. And Steve?
Timeline to review the Ecma documentation and the possibility of maybe just having a working session to go over the Ecma docs. There are some corrections that need to be made.
Okay. Yeah, and on my side, reviewing effectively having a look at the refined schema PR. And so, Matt, since you don't have anything and you need to leave early, you won't have the floor first. Otherwise, I would have given you the floor. So, briefly on the refined schema, that's the one that's pasted here by Michael. Let me paste that again. 5/14. So it's a PR that was started by Steve, and it basically the general idea is to say, instead of having a blob, actually let me share my screen because that's going to be a bit easier for everybody to understand. because otherwise there's a lot of files and it can look messy. So the idea that was actually started here by Steve is to say, rather than having text blobs that we have for each Perl type, so let me take, for instance, I don't know, Swift, right? So for Swift, we have, we have this, which is nice, except that the meaning of each of these lines and the way it's expressed on each package type is a bit, as shall I say, artistic. It's not very structured, and every type definition that we merge sometimes has a different way to present what's the namespace, whether it's required or not. So the idea is very simple, is to say instead, let's use a JSON schema where we can define these few fields, these few data fields here in a JSON file. So that's the essence of it. The second thing is to extend also in a similar way, the extend and break down the test suite we have here. So this test suite is meant by each tools to use to parse and build Perls, deal with valid and invalid. It doesn't have a schema, so it's really left at an appreciation of the reader and an appreciation of how it's being used in existing tools. And the PR is also to create a schema for that part. And actually, they could potentially be broken down into, but to have a schema for that and break the files into separate files. So we have one set of tests for each Perl types. And that's very important, also try to introduce the notion of test group, which gonna impact the conformance from the spec point of view. So if we look at these actual details here on some of the files, let me show you an example test file. So test types. Where is that? Type test. So let's look at the Swift test, for instance. Let's look strictly at this Swift. Okay, let's look only at that file. In the new mode, literally what we have is, let me remind you of the test. Let me make them side by side. Oops. So you have a bit better understanding of what it looks like. Not running notes, not this, not this. Too many tabs. No. Okay, so I'm gonna use just a new tab. Okay. Okay, I know what's happening. It's a trick with screen sharing sometimes. I was creating a bunch of windows, but they're wonderful pop behind, meaning you're creating windows, but they don't show up on your desktop. That's probably a GNOME bug of sorts. Perl spec. Pull request. I have no idea where my pull request gone, but at least we have it here. Files, Swift. That's for the test. I'm gonna view the file there. When I look also later on at the test the type definition. So actually, maybe let's start with the type definition. So the type definition in the original document, remember we looked at that a second ago, is looking, where is that? It's looking, the current type definition is looking like this, Swift. All right, I should have prepared that ahead of time. Sorry for the churn there. This is the Swift type definition here, original text. And this is the new JSON definition, where basically the type is called Swift. It's for Swift package. I kept the notes that were there originally, but now we have a structured element which says repository, and whether you use it is true or false. And if there's a default repository, you have a default repository URL. And the namespace, you say whether it's required or not. It doesn't make sense really to say whether a name is required, because name and versions are required to have some meaning. Some pearls come without version when they're used this way, so it makes no sense to put a requirement for definition as required beyond the namespace. But here we're saying it's required. That's where it's coming from. In some case, it's not fully finished, but we have these things called the native name. It should have been provided here as source host and user organization. It helps to know what is the upstream name in the package ecosystem. We have the example there. Whether it's case sensitive or not, that's the main thing. For more complex transformation, normalization rules that exist in the package ecosystem, there's a field to support that, but it's not structured, it's just a list of textual rules, because we cannot for now reasonably specify this when some of these require programmatic change, like, replace underscore with dash, like in PyPI, things like that are not really easy to specify in a rule. So don't want to overdo it. The point is we're getting from textual representation to this. This means also that once we have this JSON here on the left-hand side, the side benefit is that we can also generate, which is what we have here, by the way. We generate a markdown file here. Which is a bit more verbose than the original definition in restricted text here, but it's very clear, clean. There's no ambiguity about what is what, and there's no opportunity for artistic interpretation or rendering on the left-hand side, because this is entirely generated. So there's that. Now, when we go to the tests, this is an example of a test here on the side. And let me show you what we have on the original test suite here. So we had blocks of text like that for each test. Now, it's mostly looking the same, except the tests have been split. Here, the idea on the right-hand side, legacy, was to say, okay, you can have a Perl. If you parse and unparse, you should get a canonical Perl. If you parse, you should get these components, unless if it's invalid, maybe it's a failed test. And if you take these components, then you should get this canonical Perl. But it was all implied. Here, instead, we're saying, hey, you have a round-trip test. You have this input, this expected output. It's not expected to fail. And this is an advanced test group. So I've defined for now based on advanced tests. And the idea is, Steve, it's really important for the spec. where eventually we're saying base spec conformance means your tool pass all the base test group. We could rename that potentially conformance if we want. Advanced is if you want to support advanced feature. Here we have a valid, I don't know why it's been marked as advanced here, maybe it's a bit of an overreach. But let me show you another example. So an example here, by the way, is this is a basic parse test. The input can be canonical or not, it doesn't matter for this base. Typically for a base test, the input is canonical and the output is decoded components. And the schema is clear on that. If you're doing a round trip, input is that, output is always a canonical Perl. So there's no ambiguity whether it's canonical, not canonical, and so on. Here, if you build from these inputs, which is a bunch of components, the expected output is a canonical Perl again. So trying to remove, it's a bit more verbose in the sense that many tests here were split in 2 or 3 different tests, but the tests are much crisper, there's no ambiguity. So that's the gist of it there. And so that's an example, by the way, of a test that it's not marked as invalid or else. It's a base test which says this test is expected to fail because it's an invalid Perl input. We could, some of it I generated, so there's always opportunity to refine the reason and so on. But why is it expected to fail? Because it's a Perl without namespace. And if you remind what we looked at here, the Perl syntax for Swift says namespace is required. So we have a test to validate that. So everybody is completely stunned, bored, or trying to swallow the thing because it's a bit dense, maybe. Probably a bit of all of that at once.
Is there a, I've got a question. Is there a, looking at the type definition schema, is there
Yes.
an example of a type that has been defined that, for example, maybe uses the normalization rules?
Yeah. Yeah, that's, so we can look at that 2 ways, Markdown and, actually, we need to do that this way. Close. No, okay, close. Let me close these ones. Let's look at this definition here and the corresponding Markdown. So it's easier to look at. Okay, I didn't want to do that, but I did it anyway. Okay, so that's an example of the pros for PyPI. And here we have a bunch of normalization rules plus notes. There's something weird in the Markdown rendering, but no worries. By the way, the Markdown rendering is going to be refined a bit, so we use a template as an input rather than craft the text there. If we look at the corresponding JSON, where is my schema definition PyPI? I had opened the wrong thing. PyPI definition here. So the corresponding instance. What we're saying here is this is for PyPI. We use a repository. The default repository URL is this. It used to be that. That's just the note. There is no namespace, by the way, it's prohibited. The name is not case sensitive. It's called name upstream as a native name. And we just have like these two normalization rules. And I wish we could have something a bit more structured. And we may in the future to have something which is more structured than a list of basically instructions. But I don't think we're ready to go to full-blown detailed thingy. I think it's going to be shooting ourselves in the foot to go too quick to something which is more structured than just the list of that. And again, we discussed about the name for the field. Maybe it's not called rules because these are more instructions than rules.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to, I wanted to see an example. This, I think that's fine. Crawl before you walk. I think that the approach is fine. How does this then apply to the conformance? Would this be outside of the base test? Would this be an advanced? How does this relate? Because the definition doesn't say that it's base or advanced, or I don't know where that delineation is.
So to me, this is part of the base conformance. Being able to apply, it's basically the way you get from some naming in the ecosystem to a consistent canonical naming as a Perl, which is also consistent canonical naming in the ecosystem. So we're not inventing anything. So it has to be part of the base. Advanced thingy would be what? Say, well, let me actually, there's probably a good example of some advanced thing in Go. Let's look at an example there. Right. This is an example where the input is not valid from a strict Perl type spec definition. From a strict core spec, actually. The core standard says, you know, the type should be always lowercase. So we can discuss after that on a case by case whether we want the normalization of the type, for instance, to be part of the base. Right now, I meant to say here, well, this is an event test. It's doing a certain number of transformation. One is to lowercase and normalize the type. One is to normalize the subpath in this case. And so really the question is more then, and it's easy because we have the matter to say, hey, no, really, this should be part of base, this should be part of advanced.
Right. So I was got these two examples. When I think of conformance and machine readability, my initial objective was to have like the base level of conformance to be completely machine readable, so that, or completely automatable, sorry, so that a tool could understand by the type definition, understand all of the, you know, namespace requirements, etc., be able to understand all that, and if they meet what was defined, then that would be conformance. But in the case of the normalization rules, that requires a human in the middle to now write corner cases for that Perl type. So that defeats the automation requirement. So I would like to define, in terms of conformance, because this is going to go in the Ecma standard. What do these two levels of conformance actually mean? What are the rules for these levels of conformance? And then can we then apply them equally across all Perl types?
Trying to think. So normalization rules, whenever there's substitutions, and programmatic changes, that's really hard. But what we may be able to do is transform that as a set of permitted characters. So in the schema, where do we have that in the schema?
It's in the base.
Yeah. So in the schema, which is a bit, so it's a schema, so it's always a bit verbose, but we have this notion here of permitted characters, which is something that Matt would, I'm sure, would love, because it's expressed in the standard schema dialect, JSON schema dialect of regex. So it's the pattern language of JSON schema. So we're not inventing anything here. We could further constrain the permitted characters for, say, in this case, the PyPI name, saying the canonical name cannot have dash in its name, and that would become potentially the base conformance. The normalization here, which requires programmatic access and programmatic transformation, would become something which is advanced. That could be a possibility. Trying to think about what other types are a bit problematic there. Actually, composer may be interesting, because composer has no.
So just for clarification, I have zero issues with the schema. I think all this is fantastic. Philippe, completely on board. I just want to get very, very crisp definitions so that we can apply that to the conformance.
I'm with you there. So let's take it offline. I think it's clear, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We want to make it easy for folks to say, hey, you know, I can achieve base conformance, but not yet advanced conformance, and that would make it really easy. And so probably using a pattern to say what's permitted characters patterns would be what we had here. Permitted characters probably would be, I don't know which one we have that would have that. There's a few types.
The normalization rules could theoretically also support a regex, and you could do the search and replace, for example, on the underscore to the dash or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Maybe they even have a syntax for that. Okay. Oh, it's the full language specification. Ouch. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't realize that. I'm, I saw something called Ecma. I said, that looks good. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we discussed previously was that was, could even be as soon as a 1.1 or some other version to move to the rules. So I think if we do the permitted characters, that makes the test definitive, right, Steve, from your point of view, and that we come back to that. Just less is more,
right?
Less is more theory, because we'd like to have more examples and so on. And so, I'm dying to get this pull request done so we can start working with it. And we have this huge backlog of Perl type requests, and exactly how we need a process for that. I think it'll be some combination of reaching out to those
It's going to be
individuals
painful. Yeah.
and helping them do it. And, right now we have 29 or 28, whatever it is. And I'm expecting, well before December, we'll be up to 100 Perl types. So that'll, triple our data set, and we can proof that. So if we can have a, I guess an issue definition of normalization rules, we can start testing against that.
Yeah.
And there's, I'm sure, many of us are familiar with this set we use today because it's a sort of a, top of the language list set, but we're going to see a lot of other stuff that's less commonly used. So that'll show us more of the boundary cases that we need. So I think that's a strategy. And, I know the timeline there is not going to be short, but we could even prepare for that right before December, but have a more significant data set. So I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure we have enough pending Perl type requests to get to 100 without even any new ones, or pretty close. So that, so just to give it a little more flavor. So what, on the project management side, what we're trying to do is get this Perl request done because it's a major restructuring. We have a project out there for other restructuring items, such as moving the meetings and moving a verse back to its own repo and some other things like that John in particular is planning to do most of the work for, so that we can structure it, and also getting something about this pull request done, to me, is a gating item for doing our first release. So what I'm trying to do is get it to this and a few other changes. There's a bunch, as you said, a bunch of spelling. If you looked at those test files from Philippe, we have a missing D in round trip in a lot of the descriptions. So that's work that John and I can do pretty easily once we have the new structure in place. And then, I'd like to do a few of those and then do version 090, and then we have change control going forward to get to the final, the version 1.0. So,
So it's all linked to the timeline.
well, yeah, we got 6 weeks, right? We got 6
Yeah.
weeks till September 1st. So we want to get what we've got from the document perspective. Steve, I believe the strategy would be that we'd have a section 7 in the document for tests, separate from the definition scheme. So we'd have 6 be the definitions, which includes the index, and have a section 7 for the tests. There's been some, discussion and issues. That seems to be what most people are suggesting. We can go either way, and obviously we have other updates for that.
We could also inline the schema. The test schema could be inline the PI definition, but I feel it's going to be a bit too much data in one file.
Yeah, I mean, we do have the ability to release additional artifacts along with the PDF version of the standard. So if we want to ship the actual schemas that we reference in the human readable version of the standard, then we can ship those files along with that.
I was assuming we would do that. Yeah, that's the idea. I just, the Perl, the concept of a Perl type name is a pretty pervasive concept. So having the definitions and the tests somewhat separate shouldn't confuse people relative. They'll always be looking for that short string that identifies the type. So
So one thing also to note in the schema, it's far from perfect, but it does the number of checks on the types and the requirements of fields. Trying to reuse definition as much as possible. There's one thing of note, by the way, it's using version 7 of the draft.
That's actually fine. It's not the most recent.
We can
By
go
far.
to 2020 without a problem.
Well, we
But
had issues raised about that, Philippe, from
yes,
Darkarian and others. So I thought we agreed to stay with 7 for now and reconsider it later.
It's the most widely used version of the schema. So yeah.
We
Cyclone
don't
uses it. I don't think we got to upgrade.
we don't have a need for specific features of 2020, 2012. But frankly, in terms of tool support, I don't think there's much issue with switching to 2020 either. If anything, that the standard for OpenAPI and Swagger that everybody used to, for instance. So if we switch to, it's going to be mechanical transformation. There's a few things here. It's going to be changed to $defs as opposed to definitions. But bulk of everything is the same. Whenever possible, I try to use enumerations like here for the requirement for component, whether it's required, optional, prohibited, and follow your lead there, Steve, by the way.
Okay. Yep.
And then there's some
Yeah,
if
the
we
issue
go down-
the issue that was raised specifically in John's post was that Golang does not have good support for the newer version of the spec. I don't know whether that's true or not personally, but that's what he was pointing out.
Yeah, it's possible. But so the important thing also in terms of schema, the most complex part, maybe the qualifiers, because qualifiers is defined as a bunch of key values. Some of them that may require can have a default value and native name. So that's the most complex one. I've added something which is new, which didn't exist to date, or it existed in just prose and text, which is to have a list of reference URLs. We even have a fairly limited, but working Perl pattern regex using the Ecma standard. So that was it on my side. As a side note, just for the fun of it, there's something I've tried to do, and I'm not sure it really worked nicely as I was expecting. Technically, this file here should have an history that Git should be able to follow with a Git copy, but it really didn't work out as expected. Normally, there's a parent commit here, but the renaming goes from this Perl types to this file here. So there's some level of history, but it was not as definitive as I liked. Using some Git foo to do what's called a Git split, which is not an official operation. It uses a weird set of combination of merge and octopus merge, as it's called. I've tried to use that. It provides some level, but not super great level of history between the original types and the new definitions.
Yeah, but that's as good as it's going to get, right? Because
it could have been done better, but that would have required another extra 100 commits, automatic commits, but that would have been a lot of work. Here you see, in terms of Git foo, we're still it looks like a lot of these commits are generated from the scripting to do this kind of octopus merge, where you need to do multi-way split, multi-way branches, and multi-merge of many branches at once. So,
right, but I think, but I'd argue the urgency is to get to the new structure.
Yeah.
We have a decent trace, and again, there from a project management perspective, with the issues and PRs, John and I are waiting for this to happen so we can start, figuring out the mapping and how to reach people and how to, we're not, no PR issue will be left behind without any attention that, we'll reach out to people and so on. But we're moving to a very different and very, very important structure. So
yeah,
let's get on with it and have version control. And, this is just where we're at. We just got to get to something that's much more structured.
So one thing, by the way, so right now what I have is the schema in the directory, the test, just keyed by package type. The one that I've not package type, it has to be renamed to be for the spec, general spec.
Please.
Yeah, it's just no worries there. Then we have the generated docs for each type in a separate directory. And then we have the type definition. And so,
Which
is-
includes the index, right? The types, all the index files in there too, right? In the types.
yeah, and there's a generated index. No.
Oh no, where's the index?
The index is outside. The index is no. The index should be there in the types.
I thought I saw it there. Okay. Well,
Toc index HE.
Is it in the README? Or no?
No, it's there. Perl types index.
Oh, Perl type index. Okay.
So the reason why I use dash definition and is also to ensure that we can, if we were to merge the markdown, the test, and the definition in one file, in one directory, it's fine, and we can know what it is. Question is whether we want to have something which is a bit more like using uppercase names, prefixing the name as opposed to suffixing it. There's been some feedback there suggesting we should be better off to use all uppercase like that. I'm a lowercase person mostly. I'm not a big
Yeah,
fan.
but the types themselves need to be lowercase in the spec, so let's just keep them lowercase.
Okay, because the alternative suggestion was to where are we?
well, it was mostly about the test, and it was to do capitalized Perl dash types dot as a prefix for everything.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that adds much. I mean, people just pull this file out of, it's kind of like a license file you pull out of a project without the license, right? If it's completely out of context, this would be helpful to be more verbose in the naming, but that doesn't seem to me like a primary use case.
yeah. So there's some valid command, but the using these names. So in the end, I really don't care one way or the other, but I like to be able to sort things based on the package type rather than what's in it. So that's why I prefer to use a suffix rather than a prefix. And to me, the things need to say that it's about test. So I reply to Jan, but I'm not inclined to do much change at this stage for this. So, but if there's strong objection one way or the other, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think just having simplicity, like you've got the, pi dash definition, and then there could be just a pi dash test.
Right, which is what we're doing.
Just
Yeah.
keep it simple.
Which is what we have right now.
Yeah.
Where are we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Type. And if we merge the directories, it's a bit easier. And I like the whole case, but
Well, I don't think that we need to merge directories. I mean,
no, but if we could.
oh, you want to?
No, I don't. If we would,
Oh, okay.
I don't think I want. But the point is that it's
I
fairly easy. Also, the thing it's fairly easy to do globs on that. So I've refined and extended some of the tests you had created earlier on. Where is the Perl types? Okay. I've added a few scripts. One of them is to format the JSON, so that's super simple, of course. One is the refinement of your script to generate the markdown, which I'll transform a bit further to have a template. And these are actually just models which have been generated. Probably not sure that we'll need them in the end, which have been generated from each of the definitions. Just simple Python model to use, which we may use nicely for the markdown generation. But more important, actually, if we go to the bottom, is the fact that I did a small makefile to help. Where is the makefile there? So to make sure that we can do a format of the code and the JSON, and we can check the validity of the JSON schemas. So we do actually two things here: is validate the meta schema so that the schema itself is correct JSON schema. And second, that validate that each of the Perl types, index, definition, and tests, and you see how it's easy to do globs in this case, match their schema definition. And the rest is more for reference there. But the thing here, that means that we can extend if it's not already the case. I've not fully validated the CI, and that can be refined afterwards. But basically, what you have here, which is the generation of the docs, can be fully, so that should work actually. But the checks are parts of the CI, meaning on commit. Will have immediate feedback on the schema conformance of new types as they're pushed in PRs. It's not perfect because the schema is not meant to be perfect for now, but as we go, we can be a bit stricter. At least we will catch a lot of the weird inconsistencies we accumulated in some types.
Oh, this is all great, Philippe. Good work.
Thank you.
Yes, very good work.
There's going to be a blueprint for the version range thingy, by the way. It's going to use exactly the same thing. Type definition, generated docs, and test, using the exact same thing and using the same base of science. Knowing that in the case of verse, by the way, it's going to be a bit more involved because eventually I want to migrate all the tests we have here in this Python library. And many of these tests actually come from upstream. This is a test file that was borrowed from some Debian tool. So very quickly, you see how we can have, especially the version comparison. There's a lot of tests there. They'll be great to have as data, by the way, because that's going to be a formal way for folks that make implementation to reuse the exact same test suite. But the bulk of version range beyond the syntax parsing is being able to compare two versions according to the weird and peculiar ways of each package ecosystems.
Yeah, well, it's going to be quite the garden of various flowers over there, right?
Oh
Compared
yes,
to
yes.
Perl. Yeah.
It's going to be an exotic zoo.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it on my side for this. Michael, or John, you wanted to discuss a bit more there. So let's address otherwise the timeline.
Well, the timeline is getting this done, then making a few more housekeeping items. It's in where's the project? I'll put it in the link.
Is that beer or tea?
It's 9 a.m., man. It's tea.
Well, you know, if you ever go to Belgium someday and you walk in the streets of some cities, especially in the south of Belgium, Wallonia, it's 8 a.m. and you'll see people enjoying a lot of beer, way too much beer for my taste.
Well, there's the old wheat beer. So we're what we're so I just posted the link there. Philippe's done the migration, and we've got the structure of the new repos. So those are pretty much there, but there's just a bunch of other, again, moving meetings to its own repo. So we eventually we could have burst back, or any of the other projects under package URL could keep their meetings there. We just don't need them. Steve pointed that out. We don't need that in the Perl spec repo. Yeah. Adding a few files, contributing in addition to code of conduct, that sort of thing. a cleanup, right? So there's spelling and typos, and we'll do that. It also includes mapping each of the major, you'll see it in the tickets and the restructure ticket 520, individual files that will map to the narrative sections of the spec. And, I don't know that we're going to do a lot with those, but that way anyone can read the source or comment on the source for that if for future versions primarily. So these are housekeeping steps that we want to do. And then my plan is that we merge Philippe's PR. We have the various PRs for these other activities. And then we do our first release, version 0.90, hopefully within the space of a week. And then that, sort of freezes things. And then from that point forward, we'll do releases. And there may be a bunch of minor releases for things, but that's one of the key things we're missing today is release management. And obviously, there's a few testing things to do that, Philippe mentioned, but it's, it should be fairly straightforward, but that's kind of the core objective. So at the very least, we've got to get that done by the end of this month.
Yeah.
That only leaves us a month, but then people, if people have comments or concerns about the standard part of the spec before September 1st, they can at least zero in on it. Whereas our current system, it's all over the map, right? If you're trying to make a point, it's very confusing. So that's our objective is that, no later than the end of the month, we have version 0.90 that has the structure, that has everything, it could go, to the standards cycle, unless there are major comments. So one thing that's still an open question is we've had an issue for it is how do we get the word out? Made some efforts to try and put a mailing list together. The emails are a little hard to find, but I'll come back with a plan for that. It will create an initial mailing list with a clear opt-out option. And then we need to decide whether we use Groups.io or Google Groups or whatever. So there's an issue out there for that. Please comment. If not, we'll make a project management decision to move forward, knowing that that's not, that could be changed. We're not the Linux kernel. We're not going to live or die by the history of our email messages back to the beginning of time. So these are the project management, but we definitely want a mailing list because we have this great core group, but I think there's a lot of other people, and we'll want to have a way that people who we engage with through GitHub on their Perl type requests, for example, can follow the bigger picture. So that's just organizational at this point. But there are issues out there if people want to comment on that. Otherwise, we'll proceed with the most recommended option.
So great. Steve, you wanted to have a working session on the Ecma doc. Maybe you organize that for sometimes next week.
It depends. We're talking about a new section now, section 7 for the tests. So we might want to wait until that section is kind of in place before we actually work.
Yeah, I can work up a revision of the the framework document that I did, Steve, for that. So maybe that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine.
Let's get this thing frozen, Fleet. Let's get it done, and then we can.
And I'll
mean,
try
right.
to see whether I can get afterwards a CRISPR conformance definition.
Yeah.
And okay, and last but not least, we'll be working with each of the tools implementers over the next couple of months to help them, implement. In some cases, we'll just do the work for them and just push a PR to make sure they use the test suite, and second, that the test pass.
Yeah.
Right. General idea if someone has a pull request against the document, we'll probably just create a new Perl request in the new format, link that and alert them. If it has sufficient information, and a number of them, I'm sure, will not have sufficient information. So
yeah, so we've got a couple of months between when our final document is submitted to Ecma and the general assembly that occurs generally the first week or two of December. It would be great to get at least the major implementations conformant to the Ecma version of that, so that on release day, we can actually say, hey, these things are, and then we should probably plan some kind of PR or something
Right.
as well.
Yeah, those
Pull
are
request or press release.
Press release. Sorry.
yeah. Well, again, that's been our plan. Is essentially at least what I've been suggesting is we plan the launch, if you will, for January. I mean, December's the quiet time, so that we give ourselves to January for the launch. But we have a lot of work teed up to work on the implementations, but it's all gating on having the spec. That's the focus of it. And some of the implementations are going to be doing things beyond the standard as we put it out. But the first thing is to get the standard set. Otherwise, it's a moving target. So
I think the official standardization acceptance by ECMA presented by TC54 is going to be also a communication event in all cases.
Mhm.
Because that's general meeting, I guess it's going to be hard not to make it a communication event in any way. And one thing, by the way, just a side note, and then we're done. The CV.org organization is working diligently to adopt the Perl specification as part of the CV thing. And so tagging 090 sometimes next week also, even if it's not perfect, it's going to make them super more comfortable.
Right.
Because they can at least rely on the tag on their side and an official version, even if it's just not even a 1.0 yet, but that will make them, I'm sure, very much very happy.
And we need to reach out. I haven't done a comms plan yet, but we will put one together as a project, and we'll reach out to SPDX because they have Appendix E or something, which is essentially a slightly differently formatted transcription of the current text, right? So give them plenty of time to think about how they want to represent it. That sort of thing. So,
and CSAF and others.
Okay.
All
okay.
right.
It's that magical time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you for
Matt, after all, you were there for all the meetings, so have a great weekend.
You guys too.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye now.
All right, I'm going to shut off the recording.